You know, when we think about control, we usually picture something obvious, a direct order, maybe an open threat. But the most powerful kind of control, the most sophisticated kind, is the one you can't even see. It's not about breaking your will. It's about hijacking your brain's own survival instincts until saying yes feels like the only safe choice you have. Today, we're taking apart that invisible weapon. This is the anatomy of fear-based compliance.
And that's the central paradox, isn't it? The most effective threats are the ones nobody has to say out loud, because they use your own biology against you. Your brain is literally hardwired to protect you, but in a high-pressure situation, that same mechanism can be turned against you. Suddenly, you find yourself agreeing to things, manufacturing your own consent, just to make a feeling of danger go away.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to identify the weapon itself, the invisible gun. Then, we'll decode your brain's surrender signal and lay out the entire blueprint for what's called the submission loop. We'll get into the nitty-gritty of the neurobiology that makes this all so powerful, and then, and this is the most important part, we'll give you a tactical toolkit for taking back control. And finally, we'll look at the real cost of saying yes when you're under pressure.
Let's start with a feeling I bet every single one of us knows. It's that moment when a boss, a client, or even someone in your family makes a request, and it feels way more threatening than it should. The stakes suddenly feel sky high, even if you're just talking about a deadline. That feeling? That's the invisible gun.
We can call this sensation the biological squeeze. It's that instant physical knot you get in your stomach. Just think about it. Your boss asks you to stay late on a Friday, and the word sure just flies out of your mouth before your brain even has a chance to remember you have plans. That's not you being a team player, that's a neural hijack. In that tiny split second, your brain makes a trade. It gives up your long-term values for a quick hit of peace. It's a survival move happening faster than you can think.
And when this neural hijack happens again and again and again, well, it leads to something called moral atrophy. Your integrity doesn't just snap one day, it slowly wears away. Your brain gets trained to always seek the path of least resistance, which is always just to agree. And over time, you actually become your own jailer, enforcing your own compliance just to avoid that gut-wrenching feeling of conflict.
So, we've talked about what the squeeze feels like. Now let's break down how it's triggered. And believe me, this isn't random. There's a system to it, a process that's designed to activate your brain's built-in surrender signal.
Now, this right here is a crucial concept. It's called cognitive tunneling, and is basically the gateway to being manipulated. When you feel threatened, your higher brain functions, the parts that think about fairness or logic or long-term goals, they start to power down. Your brain has only one mission at that point: find the fastest possible exit from the stress. It stops being a negotiation and becomes an escape. And what's the quickest escape route? It's almost always the word yes.
So how does someone trigger this cognitive tunneling and then use it? Well, it happens through a repeatable four-stage process that's built to bypass your rational mind. This is the submission loop blueprint. Let's map it out. Okay, let's walk through this loop step by step. Phase 1 is the volatility prime. This is where an environment of unpredictability is created. The rules are always changing, the consequences feel huge, even if no one says so. This puts your brain on high alert. Phase 2, the shadow demand. The request is made, but the consequence for saying no is never stated. It's just this ghost hanging in the room. It'd be a real shame if this project lost its key supporters. Your brain fills in that blank with the absolute worst-case scenario. And that's the leverage point. That's what triggers the cognitive tunnel, which leads right to phase 3, automated consent. Your brain, just desperate for that feeling of dread to stop, blurts out yes. And then finally, phase 4, the relief anchor. The second you agree, the pressure is gone, the threat vanishes. And this is the most insidious part of the entire system. That feeling of relief is an incredibly powerful biological reward. Your brain gets a little flood of feel-good chemicals, let's call it relief dopamine, and it anchors the whole experience. You don't remember the coercion, you remember the wonderful feeling of safety that came right after you complied. So the manipulator isn't remembered as the source of the threat, they're remembered as the one who made the threat go away. The coercer becomes the savior. The trap is set for next time. So why is this loop so ridiculously effective? Why can it feel physically impossible to just say no when you're caught in it? Well, the answer isn't about you being weak or lacking willpower. It's pure neurobiology. There's a literal logic gate shutdown happening inside your head.
Okay, so when your brain thinks it's under threat, it gets flooded with stress hormones like cortisol. This cortisol overload causes a real power shift. Energy gets pulled away from your prefrontal cortex. That's the modern rational CEO part of your brain, and it gets redirected straight to your amygdala. That's the ancient primitive security guard part of your brain that only knows fight, flight, or freeze. And it also knows a fourth response, to fawn, to appease the threat to make it go away. Your rational brain is effectively being held hostage by its own security system.
This biological hijack traps us in something called the submission security paradox. It's this crazy mental knot where we start to believe that the very person creating all the fear is also the only one who can make us feel safe. And to deal with that conflict, we start to rationalize our submission. We tell ourselves, oh, I chose to say yes to be a team player, or I'm just avoiding drama, when the truth is, our biology already made the call for us.
So, we've diagnosed the illness, we've mapped out the system. The big question is, how do we escape? This is where we go from analysis to action. This is all about reclaiming your cognitive sovereignty, and it starts with a conscious choice to stop being a participant in the drama and start being an observer of the mechanism. Let's open the toolkit.
This is your number one weapon, the 60-second air gap. The whole submission loop depends on speed. It needs your instant reflexive yes. Your first job is to break that reflex. The second you feel that biological squeeze in your gut, you have to create space. Just 60 seconds. You can say something like, let me check my calendar and I'll get right back to you. Or, that's an interesting point, I need a minute to think about it. That tiny pause is like a fire break. It's just enough time to stop the cortisol flood and let your rational brain, your prefrontal cortex, come back online.
The Air-Gap is your first line of defense, but there are other tools in the kit. First, label the hijack. In that 60-second pause, just say to yourself, this is a biological squeeze. My amygdala is firing up. Just naming it shifts you from feeling the emotion to observing it, and that takes away its power. Next is the consequence audit, which we're about to get into. And finally, external redundancy. Have one or two trusted friends you can shoot a quick text to. A simple, hey, does this sound crazy to you? Can break the spell and give you some much-needed perspective.
Now this is a really powerful technique, the consequence audit. This is how you kill that ghost threat. You drag it out into the light. During your 60-second air gap, you take that imagined disaster from the left column, my career will be totally over, and you write down the actual probable risk in the right column. It'll be an awkward 5-minute conversation. You reframe, they will hate me forever, to the much more likely, they might be a little annoyed for a day. This process shrinks the threat from a monster in your head down to a manageable problem. It takes away all the leverage.
So let's bring this all together. The stakes for understanding this stuff are incredibly high. This isn't just about getting better at difficult conversations. This is about protecting the very core of who you are. We need to understand the true cost of a yes that's born from fear, so we can learn to anchor ourselves in our own baseline.
Think about it like this. Every time you say yes out of fear, you're taking out a loan against your own integrity, and that debt always comes due. The most controlling people aren't the loudest ones. They're the ones who have mastered the art of making the word no feel impossibly dangerous. But here's the beautiful weakness in their entire system. It only works if you don't know the game is being played. The moment you see the architecture of the trap, it starts to lose all its power. Awareness is the kill switch.
So I want to leave you with this final thought. Think of it as a mental weapon for the next time you feel that pressure building. When you feel that biological squeeze, that overwhelming urge to just agree to make it all stop. Remember this mantra. The pressure is designed to define the path for you. Your job is to ignore all that noise and anchor back in your baseline, your values, your goals, your truth. That is the moment control comes back to you.